Hello there and welcome back to Tatooine Tableflip. I'm Jimmie and today we're going to be looking at the Exit series of games from Cosmos Games. I'm going to grab a cup of tea and let's get these things to the table. The Exit series currently consists of the games The Pharaoh's Tomb, The Secret Lab, and The Abandoned Cabin, all designed by Inca and Marcus Brand. Taking a cue from the real-life escape room attractions, the Exit series packs a lot of game into a small component-light box. Intriguing and sometimes maddeningly difficult, the games succeed in bringing to your tabletop the feel of being locked in a lab or lost in a tomb. Escape rooms are all the rage right now. For the uninitiated, this is a room that you and your friends are checked into, laden with items that may or may not contain clues that might gain your release from this locked environment. If you've seen my Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective review, you've heard me talk about how terrible I am at deduction-style games, so I just put them right off. However, that game gives you little morsels here and there to help keep the ball rolling so you're never truly stumped. And ultimately, I found that I really love those games. But in a closed room environment, I would be thoroughly useless, so I avoid them like the plague. This locked room craze has started to seep over into tabletop gaming at kind of an alarming speed. When I had first heard about this type of game, I thought it was an incredibly silly idea because ultimately you get to play the game once and that's it. Because after the one time through, you'd have the solution, right? I mean, it can work out to be the greatest gaming experience you've ever had, but you still only get to do it once. So I figured, why bother? And like their real life counterparts, decided to avoid them like the plague. However, the more I started thinking about it, the more I came to realize that likely I was denying myself something that was probably a really cool gaming experience, even if I thoroughly suck at it. Cosmos has had a lot of games that I enjoy, and many of their games are family friendly. So when I heard that they were producing a locked room scenario style series of games, I thought, that probably won't be too difficult and might be quite fun to play. So I thought I'd give them a shot, right? And then the more I read about it, the more excited I became to play them. But, oh, little did I know what I was letting myself in for. Here's how it works. The game is super light in components, being mainly card-driven. So everything you see here is what's included in the box. These are your riddle cards. These are what you're going to be gaining throughout play that represent each piece of a puzzle that you and your friends are hoping to solve, stepping you that closer to escape. I found that some of the puzzles took 2 or 3 of those cards to work out, while some of them you gain early and some of them you gain late and they would work together. The game's non-linear, so sometimes I would have quite a few of these cards laid out in front of me and they would just be hanging out until I found the other cards needed for that particular conundrum. Now, playing through this, I'm trying to stay as spoiler-free as possible, and really this is all I can show you. But you have your riddle cards, your answer cards, some clues, the rule booklet, the booklet you use in the game, a code wheel that's themed to each of the 3 sets, and so far as I know, at least in the set I played and in this set that a buddy of mine and I played, unknown items. I played through the Emperor's Tomb by myself, and for the first few minutes until I figured out that some of the cards you might have to just set aside until you gained other cards that sort of locked into those and then would present that particular puzzle as a whole, I was immensely frustrated and was ready to give up on the game, but I decided to push on through, and then after a few minutes, the way the game plays started to make sense. It presents this absolute barrier. It's not just a series of puzzles. It basically says, here's a room, the door is locked, go. And you use the wheel. It's really difficult to talk about these games and stay spoiler free. It's really, really difficult. The wheel is just used for coding while you're in game, etc. And man, it was so for me anyway, unbelievably tough. I mean, I had a great time playing it, but I took 2 hours, used all of the clue cards, and at the end I scored out 2 measly stars. 2. These are the answer cards. As you continue on through the game and figure out the puzzles, or think you've figured out the puzzles, you'll be awarded with a number that corresponds to one of these cards. I was really impressed with how well this deck is constructed and how it would either allow me to progress further into the game or boomerang me back to the start of a particular puzzle so I could start over and try again. And some of them I actually found to be a little snarky about it, giving me a good laugh to help ease my ridiculously high amount of frustration. These are the clue cards, and I am so thankful they're included in the game. Otherwise, I might have stalled out completely and just given up. Because remember, I'm terrible at this kind of thing. So each of the puzzles, when it's presented, has a particular symbol, and what you can do is you can just, at any time, decide to look at these clue cards. And you get clue number 1, which is very general, clue number 2, which is a little more specific, and then finally, it just flat gives you the solution to the particular riddle that you're working on at that point. I loved this part of the game. Oh my gosh. If I would have been beating my head on the table out of frustration. These are they're a huge help in the game, but they can also be a significant crutch. So a little bit of a drawback is that you might find yourself, if you get a little frustrated with some of the puzzles like I did, I wanted to get on with the gameplay, so I didn't like hang around. I decided just to start grabbing clues and looking through. And consequently, I used all of them. And at the end of the game, you're actually scored higher for the lesser amount of the cards that you use. So as you go through each of the riddles, the less of these you look at, the higher your score is going to be at the end. Despite the lack of components, there is a significant amount of game packed into these tiny little boxes. And ultimately, despite how much I talked about how frustrated I was going through the game, I really, really love them. They're really fantastic. There's 2 puzzles in the Pharaoh's Tomb in particular that are so crazy inventive that without the solution cards, I wouldn't have been able to figure out either of them. I guess I'm just not wired that way, but they are the type of puzzle that you and your friends are going to be talking about long after you put the game back up on your shelf. They're really, really that good. Speaking of shelving, if you're like me, you could probably get away with putting the game up for a few months to a year and then pulling it out again, and you might not remember enough of it and enjoy it all over again. Or maybe you just like to go through it again, and despite knowing the solution, you'd enjoy it anyway. However, these don't really lend themselves well to that at all, because they want you to go one step further. See, they've introduced a kind of a legacy aspect to the game, whereby you're going to be marking up cards or tearing up the book or other little bits of the components and basically destroying some of the game. Now, I got around this when I played my solo version because I basically made copies of everything. So I didn't have to tear up the things it asked me to tear up or poke holes in the things it asked me to poke holes in, or etc. Instead, I thought eventually I could pass the game on to one of my friends. But I would suggest that as you're playing any of these, that you do exactly what the game asks of you to play the game, because at the end, you'll end up with something that is uniquely yours. And despite being marked up and torn up and etc., it's something that you'll be able to pull out, and instead of enjoying again, you'll be able to show off as a significant achievement, because these games are not easy. And that legacy aspect, I think, is kind of a cool thing in there. I'd like to be able to, like The Ring, pass the game from friend to friend. But the with the fact that you have to mark things up and tear things up, it's just not going to happen. But it does, again, become something that it's uniquely yours. You can pull it down and pass on this outrageously awesome story of this adventure you took and how you beat it. Oh my gosh, I found these games maddeningly frustrating, but ultimately a fantastic experience. I'm still a bit gobsmacked over how much game is packed into each of these tiny little boxes. I played the Pharaoh's Tomb, as I said earlier, solo, and afterward it took a little bit of mulling over, trying to decide whether or not I wanted to continue through the others solo, if I wanted to play with others, and ultimately I decided to play with my friends, and that made the experience just that much deeper. I can't wait for you guys to try one of these. It's going to be a fantastic game night for you and your friends. So, inventive gameplay and crunchy mechanisms and a weird, lingering type of hurts so good felicity has guaranteed that these games have a spot on my game shelf. And that's going to be it for this episode. Hey, if you guys like what you're seeing, please give me a like down there and subscribe to the channel so you get all the new episodes as they come out. You can reach us at boardgamerblues.com or on Twitter and Facebook @BoardGamerBlues. And if you like, you can even send me an email directly. It's Jimmie, Jimmie, @BoardGamerBlues.com. That's it for me, everybody. If I can manage to find my way out of any of these locked scenarios, I'll see you next time on Tatooine Tableflip. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.